Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, where we look into the many facets of the job, the career, and the lifestyle of investment and insurance product wholesaling. I'm your host, the creator of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience, and yours truly, Awesome Mike. Hey, everyone, guess what? Another special guest on the show today, and this time I really mean it. I actually mean it every time, of course. Let me introduce you to her. Natalie Siston. That's right. We got her on the show, folks. Natalie Siston is the Director of Sales Coaching and Development at Nationwide Financial, where she and her team are focused on building and maintaining a coaching culture within their sales organization. Now, her professional career at Nationwide spans over many roles over the past decade, to include Marketing Leadership Rotation Program Associate, Senior Consultant of Distribution Channel Marketing. You might know that as wholesaling, ladies and gents. President of the All Women Associate Resource Group. Director of Affinity Business Development and Relationship Management. She's done a lot of things there. They are lucky to have her. Now, Natalie's experience in the nonprofit, higher education, and corporate sectors helped her to realize a very important thing. She realized that everything she ever needed to know, she actually learned by growing up in a small town of only 600 people. This inspired her to create Small Town Leadership, which is a platform to share stories about growing up in a small town and their corresponding leadership lessons, who, by the way, are the proud sponsor of the 2019 Dublin Dynamite, which is her daughter, Mary Beth the Fierce. It's her 10U select softball team. You should see the smile on her face right now. By the way, Small Town Leadership, you have to go and check out her 52 weeks of meaningful connections on Small Town Leadership for her tips on networking and connecting. They are remarkable and very inspiring. Now, let's talk about how she's able to do all this stuff. Well, Natalie earned her undergraduate degree in psychology and political science, magna cum laude, from The Ohio State University. Like, that's hard, Natalie. And then she went on to earn her MBA in marketing and talent management at the Fisher College of Business, which is also, of course, at The Ohio State University. I should note that she was a Wheeler Scholar. Top 15% of the graduating class gets that honor. She's a pace setter. And guess what? The president of the Fisher Graduate Student Association. Now, that is a notable accomplishment. We appreciate that very much about you, Natalie. Now, she's also a certified professional coach, corporate mentor at the Ohio State University Fisher College of Business, and a featured speaker at the Buckeye Leadership Fellows program. Wow. Welcome to the show, Natalie. Thank you for having such a long-winded resume. I feel like I am an endurance athlete like you are as well. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm really well. Thank you for that amazing introduction. And you've just taught me a very important lesson about making sure that I'm comfortable having my LinkedIn profile read by someone on a podcast. But I appreciate hearing you speak through it. That's terrific.
Well, you know, I did get some of the skeleton of it, but the softball team wasn't on your LinkedIn
That's
profile.
true. That's true. I did make a post one day about that one though. So you had to dig around a little bit to find out about my proud mama moment of sponsoring the softball team.
Yeah, and Mary Beth the Fierce, that might stick actually. Mary Beth the Fierce, because you said she was looking fierce there. Before we get into it though, today's a pretty special day. In fact, this month is a special month for you, young lady. And let me just kind of tell the audience, you are celebrating something very special this month. First one is, let's give a big round of applause. All the guests that are on the show should pay tribute to you, and all the audience should as well. We're applauding your loving husband, Rob, for being promoted to full professor at The Ohio State University. Whoop, whoop. Pretty amazing.
That's right.
He also completed a half marathon, which, by the way, is like running out to the mailbox for you two, though. Let's call it what it is. But he did a half marathon, and probably more importantly, is he helped you to get your kitchen and the first floor of your home remodeled.
It's been a lot. There's been a lot going on. Yeah.
And it looks very nice, by the way. So kudos on that one. But let's all also recognize and maybe pay a sober tribute and a tone of gratitude to the wonderful woman for making today possible. And that, of course, is your dear mother, Mary Powell, who today is retiring from her 40-year career serving your community, both at the local bank, at the local office of the United Church of Christ, and for the past 20 years as the fiscal officer at the Tiffin Seneca Public Library. What a terrific role model she must have been to you. You mentioned 10 things that you learned from her. Tell us, though, Natalie, what's the number one thing that you learned from your mother over the years?
Well, first of all, thanks for recognizing my mom. This will make her whole career to have been noted on a podcast, and we are recording this the day that she retires, so that's terrific. I think the biggest thing I learned from my mom, and it actually wasn't the number one thing on my list, it was the number two thing. It is that you can work hard, you can have very high expectations for people, and you can care a whole lot at the same time. I've just seen my mom throughout her career be the caretaker, the glue. At her retirement party last week, she was referred to as the glue multiple times. And I would say that's true of her in our life as a family as well. I think we can't take for granted how much that feeling of care matters for those who we are working with day in, day out.
Yeah, and that's a resounding theme in your life's work thus far, making you sound like you've done a lot, but you actually have. But tell us, how did it start? How did you get developed that? And by knowing your mother's story, and even your father's story with let's call it the challenges the day after Christmas. There's some things that you've been taught as a youngster, but tell us about what it was like growing up in the middle of Ohio.
I didn't know anything different, obviously. So I grew up in Republic, Ohio. It's in the north central northwest quadrant of the state, in between Toledo and Columbus, near Findlay. For those of you who have a map, if you ever find Gary's equipment on the map of Republic, Ohio, my parents live right across the road. So my joke is that we almost made it onto the map. But growing up in Republic, Ohio, only thing I knew for a very long time, aside from occasional family vacations to nearby states or eventually across the country, was how you get to know people. And from a very, very early age, I saw my parents interacting in the community, in the church, in any place we were involved. I saw my grandparents highly involved in the farming community, in all the local civic organizations. Growing up for me meant community. And from a very young age, I learned that what you give is what you get, and you need to give back constantly to the place that raised you up. And I see that now. I see that with my mom retiring. I'm very excited for her next chapter. But that's been the foundation of who I am. And when I made my first big leap into a big place when I went to the Ohio State University as a freshman in college, it was the only place I applied. I was bound and determined to play trombone in the Ohio State University marching band. And believe it or not, I got cut in the first round. So I truly don't accomplish everything I set out to do, much to your chagrin. And when I was cut from the band, it was almost a relief, because then it was like, oh my gosh, I've got this place as my playground. And for the first couple of weeks at a huge campus, 48,000 students, and not to mention all the other people who help support and run that place, I was like, this is perfect. This is beautiful. No one knows where I am. No one's tracking me down. No one can go tell mom what I'm up to. And after a couple of weeks, it just got really lonely. And I realized in that moment that I was going to make that place feel like Republic, Ohio. And that's what I've done every single place I've moved in my career. So once I graduated from Ohio State, I moved out west. I worked in Silicon Valley at Stanford for 4 years while my husband was working on his PhD. And I made Palo Alto and Silicon Valley feel like Republic, Ohio. Then when I had the chance to move back to Ohio State, because my husband got a job teaching on faculty here, which is very rare, by the way. It's not very typical to go work for your alma mater, but when that call came in, we have never jumped so high in the air as when that job offer came through. And when we came back to settle, I feel like we are settling here. It was, how do I continue making all these places I am feel like Republic, Ohio. And I've done the same thing with Nationwide, 30,000 associates. It's easy to get potentially lost in a big company like this. And I decided I'm not going to let that happen to me. So I did all the things I know how to do from Republic, Ohio, which is to get to know people, understand what value they're bringing, show them what value I could bring, and then work together to collaborate and build on that vision.
That's a wonderful story. We're going to definitely pick it apart and dig into it and really, reap the benefits of that story. So as you grew up, though, all of these people that were around you were almost kind of like family. You mentioned grandparents, you mentioned parents. But I want to ask you about Kathy, who is the administrator at the Ohio State University. That kind of was maybe your first, I don't know, out of Republic role model or mentor. Can you tell us about how that happened, what it meant to you, and maybe how we as sales professionals and wholesalers and financial advisors can either be a role model, be a mentor like Kathy was to you, or even continue to look for someone like that?
Terrific. Yes, this is one of my favorite stories that I've shared on the blog, and I've shared it probably on a weekly video at some point or other too. But Kathy Cleveland Bowl is a woman who lives and works right here in Columbus, Ohio. But the way I came to meet her was when I was 18 years old. I attended a women's networking event at Ohio State. And growing up, women's networking events were not a thing. We didn't have those in Republic, Ohio. So I got invited. I figured out how to get there. I had to take a public bus. And I mean, just imagine me I'm used to driving around everywhere in a pickup truck, had to figure out how to work public transportation. Get to the place, walk in, was feeling overwhelmed. The first person I run into is Kathy. And I've learned, so this is a great tip for all the listeners, is a general connection point is geography. And we went to the "Where are you from?" And whenever I am speaking, especially to college students, younger people, and I say, when you're answering this question, tell people specifically where you are from. Don't say, "Oh, I'm from near Tiffin." Say, "I'm from Republic." So in that moment, I said, "I'm from Republic," and Kathy said, "No way. I'm from Old Fort." Old Fort is equally small town. It actually might be more in the 500 population or 400. And we played each other's schools in volleyball. I had my first shutout serving game of volleyball against Old Fort as a junior high school 7th grader. That will be my one athletic fame in volleyball. But Kathy was from there, and I knew the last name because obviously when you grow up in small towns, you're like, "Oh, so you're part of the Cleveland family." I probably played against those kids in sports and went to the same band concerts and that kind of thing. And in that moment, Kathy displayed to me that, okay, you can be a small town girl and you can make it at a place like Ohio State. And we lost touch after that because she ended up starting her own business, her own consulting firm, and moved away from the university. But when I came back to get my MBA 10 years later, I was thinking about this whole space of talent management, consulting, speaking. And the first person I thought of to talk to was Kathy. And without hesitation, she said yes when I reached out to her to meet up. And since then, that was now over 10 years ago, we speak quite frequently. As a matter of fact, I have an email in my inbox where we are overdue for a breakfast or lunch meetup. But over these 20 years now that we've known each other, it's been her showing me the way and her not hesitating to share advice, a quick phone call, a 2-hour meeting, whatever was needed. And when I went to launch Small Town Leadership, she was the first person I called because I knew that she would A, understand the concept, and B, be able to tell me kind of some of the ways to start things and move a little quickly. And a couple years ago, when Kathy was looking to get back into the workforce, she was diverting from her consultancy. I became a resource for her. And that became very clear to me that we can never underestimate the value we're bringing to any relationship. We may think that we're the one giving, or taking, but guess what? Someday those roles will switch. And if you've done the right thing by a relationship along the way, it will work out for you when it's your turn to ask for the help, or in my case, when it's finally my turn to give the help.
What a great story. What a great story. It's interesting when you think small town America, middle America especially, um, it is, I want to say it's not normal. A lot of girls stay at home and they become homemakers, and they kind of, I would say they maybe don't develop the wingspan that you did to go off and to really go after things. I'm glad that you brought up the Stanford connection, because I saw that in your profile and I thought it's kind of, left coast a little bit there. So I guess it was just you being a supportive, loving spouse to your husband as he went out there. Makes perfect sense. But how did you develop such a wingspan, Natalie, to be able to take the choice of taking the risk and putting yourself out there as a corporate executive, now even as an entrepreneur, um, from such a small town?
It all happens one step at a time. And now as a professional coach, that's something that I work with people on day in, day out, is things happen one step at a time. And for me, it was one 4-H meeting at a time. It was um, one speech on the stage at a time. It was one sewing project at a time, one musical at a time. And so I was always busy as a kid growing up in rural America. I was always in sports and musical, band, 4-H, worked. Oh my gosh, Mike, I have worked since I was 12 years old. So I don't know a life without work. And when I interview other people from small town, that comes through big time. I say, what's the one thing you bring with you? And it's the work ethic. So I think it's all these experiences I've had where I've gotten to try different things, do things, be in front of people, screw up in front of people, triumph in front of people, and then pivoting that to a professional stance. It's all the same. Professional growth happens one step at a time. I started a job at Stanford as a 22-year-old who didn't go there, and made it my home for 4 years because I showed up and I worked hard and I built relationships and I had creative ideas and I wasn't afraid to share those creative ideas. I think when you grow up in this small environment, oftentimes you don't know what's possible because you don't see what's possible. I talk to a lot of young women about this. When you don't know what's possible, you can't see those possibilities. But I, for some reason, never really had that as a barrier because I kept looking at the distance. I kept seeing people triumphing and seeing that I could do these things too. Now, I definitely played small a lot in my life too because of the small town factor, and I'm starting to come into that now as a 39-year-old. But I think that the wingspan for me was one day at a time. And now through small town leadership, one of my big goals is how can I talk to other women young women from small towns and encourage them that there's a big world out here and you have no idea the jobs that are available. You have no idea the opportunities that are available. And it's just a matter of doing a little bit of research, making some connections, and seeing where life in the world will take you.
So Natalie, that's a great kind of an intro into small town leadership, which when I look at small town leadership, I get the feeling of like side hustle gone wild, because it is extremely successful, even if it's only a side hustle at this moment. What caused you to want to do small town leadership, and kind of give us the director's um, version of what it's all about?
Wonderful. I love talking about this. It's a great story as well. I started small town leadership in 2016, but in order to get there, I had to have a little bit of strife, call it, in my own life. So the year before, I had just killed it from a professional standpoint. I had a great review. I earned a great bonus that year. But the team was doing great. We were just rocking and rolling, but I was feeling meh. And for those, that's a very technical term. Meh is something that many people come to coaching for. I was not seeking a coach at the time, but I happened to meet a woman named Michelle at an offsite event for work. And at lunchtime, I somehow felt comfortable enough with her to spill my guts around just having this feeling of meh. And she said, well, I'm a coach, and that's what I help people with. Do you want to talk? And I thought, what is this coaching thing you speak of? Sure, let's chat. So Michelle and I engaged with one another for about 6 months. And by the end of 2015, I knew that in order for me to get that spark back, to really feel like I was on fire, I needed to be doing two things, and that was speaking and writing. Ever since I was a little kid in 4-H, that's what I did. I spoke, and everything I spoke, I wrote originally. And one night, because most ideas come like this, I was thinking about what do people usually come to me and ask me to speak about? typically at the time I was speaking a lot at Ohio State or at community events, women's events, and I was speaking about networking or mentoring. And every time I did those events, I was talking about growing up in Republic, Ohio, and how having this small town community feel made it easy for me to quote network when I really don't like that word, or to show up as a mentor, because that's what you do in a community. You help each other out. And so I said, I think this thing that I have, that my leadership style is small town. And a day later, I was listening to a podcast, and the person was talking about the idea, and they went out to GoDaddy to see if the domain was available. And I was like, oh, is that how you build a website? You have to go see if the domain's available. So that night I went to GoDaddy and I checked to see if small town leadership was available. And would you believe it? It was not. Someone else owned it. Yeah. So I had to have GoDaddy broker that site for me for $400. I purchased Small Town Leadership, which isn't that bad for a site with leadership in it. And over the beginning of 2016, I taught myself how to build a website. I created a bunch of blog content, and I put it out into the world. And it was scary, because doing that, I was thinking, oh my gosh, are people going to think I'm not dedicated to my day job because I now have this website and I'm writing and I'm putting myself out there? But I just kept putting myself out there, and I kept putting myself out there. And eventually that led to me getting a coaching certificate, because someone mentored me and said, have you considered becoming a coach? And I said, it's funny, you are not the first person to talk to me about that. So I ended up going to coaching school starting in 2016. And so small town leadership has morphed into, it's more than a platform for speaking and writing. It's a platform for me to show the world what's possible when you're truly authentically you, when you get out of your own way, and when you take what you think are those small ideas and you turn them into something big. And that's really what small town leadership has become. I do a lot of speaking for either community groups or university groups, sometimes for corporations and organizations. And the messages are always around, how do we make this big world, this big, crowded, crazy world, feel like a small town? How can we truly create community in such a crowded world? That's what my aim is with small town leadership. And it's something I work on every single day.
Well, I'm a fan, and I know that the guests are going to, or the audience, I should say, are going to be just screaming right now for me to shut up and let you continue to talk. Appreciate that very much from you. I want to ask you, though, you are involved with your university quite a bit. You do a lot of, I guess, unpaid stuff probably, or it looks like it. Is that you giving back for a reason, or is that, or is it a political platform? Do we see Siston for governor? Do we see Siston for, Senate president down the road?
I don't have any political aspirations. When I thought for a very long time in my life I would go into politics. I ran for lieutenant governor at Ohio Buckeye Girls State, and I lost. And I spent time in Washington, D.C. as a student at Ohio State. And honestly, being that close to government and how things really worked, it didn't move fast enough for me. And so if I were to get involved in anything civically, politically, it would be at a very, very localized level, because that's where the true change happens. I don't really have any interest in getting involved in the macro issues that are really just a lot of hot air and talk. In my perspective, I want to be affecting change where the community where my girls are going to be raised. And so they have no problem seeing themselves in any position, whether it be in government, whether it be in corporations, whether it be in the social sector. I want to be close to it at that level. So giving back at Ohio State is truly that. It's giving back. I'm doing 2 keynotes in the next 2 weeks to groups of incoming seniors in high school. They're all women, and they're contemplating whether they come and major in business. And so I'm a perfect person to come speak, because I didn't even go near the business school when I was an undergrad, because I thought that, oh no, girls from small towns don't major in business. We don't do business. We serve. We just show up and serve people, or we do manual type things. And so for me to show up to tell these young women that not only can you do this, but we need you and we want you to do this, it's really powerful for me to do. So let's just face it, some of that is a little selfish, because I get a great feeling from that. But there's always one or two or three young women who follow up with me after those events to say, thank you, your message resonated. I see more possibilities for myself now than I did before. That's why I show up and do what I do, especially at Ohio State.
Just remarkable. So I want to ask you though about your social media activity and your presence. You really do, you kind of, you have an Instagram account. I mean, so you're really putting yourself out there. I'm a father of, I have two daughters. I have two sons as well. I have two daughters, and there's all of this. I don't want to call it negative, but maybe like there's a boogeyman kind of a feeling about being on social media. Can you tell us your view on that, and maybe give us a little bit of insight?
I've never had much of a problem putting myself out there and being on social media because I'm doing things from a couple different lenses. I'm putting out my own content. I think the way you and I originally connected was through one of my weekly videos that I put on LinkedIn. And guess what? No one asked me to do those. No one said, "Oh, you should go put videos on LinkedIn." But when I was writing 52 Weeks of Meaningful Connections, I wanted a cadence. I wanted something for me to be able to latch onto week after week. And and someone said, "Why don't you do a weekly video?" And I was like, "Oh, really? I hadn't thought about that type of thing." And so I started doing them, and I kept doing them. And then 30 weeks later, I'm still doing them, and 40 weeks later, I'm still doing them. And by the way, I get to 52 weeks, and I was like, "Oh, do I keep doing videos?" And everyone's like, I don't run into people anymore at work or in the community, and they always say, "Oh, I saw your LinkedIn video." And so for me, those videos have become part of my identity. They've become part of who I am on social media. And what's funny, Mike, is that on LinkedIn they get a lot of views. So and on Facebook, really they hadn't been getting many views until the past month when I've started talking about people who are really important to me. So I did a video about my husband getting his promotion. And for those of your listeners who don't know much about academia, getting to full professor is a trip. It is a ride. It is a huge undertaking, and I couldn't be more proud of Rob and his accomplishment. I did a video around one of my former associates who made a big career leap and is just doing amazing work. And then I did a video on my mom. And I think for me, there's a nice blend of I now have a spotlight that I can shine on other people through the work I'm doing. And that seems really easy to put out on social media. I don't get into any sort of controversy on social media. I don't engage in debate on social media. I'm there to be a supporter. I'm there to share good work. I'm there to post good work of other people who are doing it. And more than anything, and I think the funny thing is a lot of people don't see what happens behind the scenes, like your private chats and message spaces on LinkedIn or Facebook. But that's where I connect with people like you. I mean, that's how you and I originally connected, was just through LinkedIn messaging. And so I think there's many people I have done the LinkedIn back and forth with, and I make it a commitment that every week I try to meet one person who I've only been in a LinkedIn message or a Facebook message back and forth with in person. And if we're local, we try to meet up. And if we're virtual, we do what you and I are doing right now, and we hop on video conference and we chat for a bit of time. That's how we make our big world feel like a smaller place. And that's how we make things human, because that's, at the end of the day, I think that's all we want. Is we want belonging and we want community. And I'm just doing what I know how to do. I don't follow anybody's script. I don't follow a social media plan. I don't have a big Excel spreadsheet telling me what to do next. Maybe I should, I don't know, but I just do what I think feels right. And sometimes I'm on Instagram more, and sometimes I'm on LinkedIn more, and sometimes I'm not on none of them because I need a break, and it's all okay. It's what I like to say is there's no forcing me to do any of that stuff, which makes it all fun.
Just wonderful. And that's a good intro to my next comment. And we're talking about your vision of success and some of the kind of the underlying mantras that you've used to be successful. One in particular is I dug it up, and it's the care competence matrix. I'm all about the matrices. I'm all about, quadrant 1, quadrant 2, the Stephen Covey thing. I even shaved my head like Stephen Covey just as a tribute to him. Just kidding. But anyways, can you tell us about the care competence matrix, the low care, low competence, why bother, low care, high competence, et cetera?
Sure. Sure. This is it's very impactful to me right now. It's something that I wrote quite a while ago, and what I'm finding is the content I make doesn't it's timeless. So why not repost it again and again? But this is a lesson I learned from Rob, my husband, and so as a professor. You can get very burnt out very quickly in that profession because there's so much to do. I think a lot of people have this dream that it's like Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society, and you get to stand on a desk and speak and, wear your coat with your elbow patches and such, but it's really hard work. You are running your own business, you're managing people, you're putting out quality high work, plus you're on committees. It's just, there's a lot going on. So one day Rob came home and he was just extremely burnt out, and it was mostly because he was the go-to guy. Students just flocked to him. And I quickly drew something out on a Kleenex in the bathroom where we were having the conversation. I said, I think this is it. I think it's because you show up in this one quadrant of the matrix. And I drew this out. And so just visualize this with me. So you've got on one axis, you've got care, and one axis, you have competency. So in that lower left quadrant, you have low care and you have low competence. And what I say to that quadrant is, why bother? Like, who cares? Why even show up? So if you're thinking about this from a management perspective. So you move over to someone who's got high competence but low care, you're probably going to do enough to squeak by. Like, you'll dot all your I's, cross all your T's because this person knows their stuff. But knowing they don't care, you're probably not going to do much more. Now, the person who isn't competent but cares a whole lot, what I say about that is you're probably going to try really hard for that person because you know they care so much that you want them to show up well. So you will do your best work. You're probably going to try to help propel them. The sweet spot, and where I told Rob I think he was showing up, which was leading to the burnout, was this high care, high competence. So not only very knowledgeable, you know your stuff, but you care a lot. And when you have those, that's the magic combination of people wanting to come to you because they know they're going to get sound advice, they know they're going to get good answers, and they just keep coming back. And I think when I drew this on a blog post, I drew in pink heart magic marker, I think, because that's what it feels like to me, and that's what it feels like we want and need more of in any space we're in. I think that's why I do the work I do, is because I help move the needle to help people just care a little bit more.
Yeah, it's obvious. It's obvious in your language that you choose to use. It's obvious in your nonverbal communication skills, as well as the actual words that you are sharing and putting out there. I watched your the 52 weeks of meaningful connections. I'll admit I didn't watch all of them, but I watched most of them, which is why I have a little bit of the bags under my eye, actually. But one of them that really kind of struck a chord with me personally, being an extrovert, an outgoing salesperson, a spokesperson for a company, and now even a broadcaster and coach in my own genre, is the one that you talked about. Who will you talk to longer? And in this world of instant gratification, and I think it's, shallowness, and that might even be an exaggeration, you really bring up a great point, not necessarily about going horizontal, but by going vertical. Can you tell us about the mentality or the content behind the who will you talk to longer video you made?
Absolutely. Well, I credit a guy named John Moore for that quote. We were together taking an unconscious bias training, which is another topic that I speak about quite frequently. And we were having the training, and everybody had to come up with what their takeaway, what's their action item that they're going to lean into. And John was sitting next to me, and he said, I think it's actually pretty simple. He said, I think I need to talk to more people, comma, longer. It's me inserting that comma, but it's so profound. I remember sitting still in my chair, writing that down, going, I'm going to write about this someday. And a few months later, when I was in the 52 Weeks of Meaningful Connections, it felt like it was the right time. I was also reading Brene Brown's Braving the Wilderness at the same time, which is all about how do we go deeper? How do we get up close to people? what we're experiencing right now is, to your exact point, everything's so shallow, so surface. We tell ourselves stories about what other people are going through because that's what our brain does. That's completely normal for us to take shortcuts and get to the point at the quickest way possible. But that's also why we have a bunch of bias in our world. And John's comment then, talk to more people longer, is the antidote to bias. Because if I sit here and talk to you for another 3 hours, your listeners probably don't want that, so we won't do that to them, Mike. But if we were to, we would uncover so much stuff about each other that we may not agree on things. We may not have the same ideology, we might not have the same viewpoints, but we would appreciate the viewpoints that one another has. And that's what inclusion is. That's how we get to inclusion, is not by agreeing with each other, because that's not going to happen. Let's just face it. And that's why we live in a really rich country the way we do. We can have those viewpoints, but we have to be able to talk to each other about them. That's what's missing right now in a big way in our society, is the ability to get into that meaningful dialogue, knowing we're not there to change someone's mind. We're just there to get to know them a little bit better.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking that I believe I started to embrace that strategy or that ideology when I started to travel. And I started to realize, oh, wow, there is a different way to do things, or there is a different facet to this jewel, a different window of the house you can look out, opposed to the one out of your little room there. Um, how did the transplanting of Natalie Siston from Republic, Ohio to Columbus to Stanford, how did that transition change you? And did that open your eyes in this regard?
Oh my gosh, so much, so much. And I think it's not because the same kinds of people didn't live in Republic, Ohio, who lived in Columbus and Silicon Valley. I think there are more of the same. We are all more of the same than we even believe. But I got to see people showing up differently. So from a diversity lens, Ohio State became the place where I got to know people from different backgrounds, different types of upbringings, different countries, which is tremendous. Moving to Silicon Valley was amazing because I am 22 years old, newly married. I went out there without a job. It was 2002. The economy was tanking. I had this voice in my head telling myself, oh, you can't go work at tech companies. That would be silly. So I did what I knew, and I knew universities. Like, that's what I knew. And so I planted myself at the university. And holy cow, the students I got to meet at Stanford are incredible. And I follow a lot of their careers to this day, and it's pretty remarkable what's happening. And I think more than anything, my husband, who was 2 years older than me, he was there a little bit before I was. We commented a lot that we both went to Ohio State. We both did really well there. And he then went on and got his PhD at Stanford, which presumably is harder than getting your undergrad at Stanford. And I went there and worked and did really well at a job, which also you could say might be harder than showing up and getting a degree. And we commented a lot that we did really well there, but there's no way we would have gotten accepted based on kind of our upbringing, our status, our recommendations, our activities, that kind of thing. So living in California taught us that we can do this too. We aren't that much different than the people who came here with those pedigrees. And we talk about that a lot, even now, of just how do we make sure we're keeping a bigger vision for ourselves and for our family, for our daughters, because we know it's possible. So California probably wasn't so much about learning, differences from more of the diversity standpoint. It was more, how can we bring our strengths to bear and bring those back here to Columbus, Ohio, where we're making a difference in our community now.
That strength, you two and all of your family, but especially you two, have had some great heights, some great successes, and they haven't come, with their counterparts, or they haven't come without their counterparts. These trials, if you would. I really appreciated you sharing what you quoted as your year of yuck. That was an experience, and it really hit me because of you kind of acknowledged that you had this anger, and I feel like I have that myself. Like, I feel like I have this underlying anger at times, which on occasion I can use it to fuel me. but I felt like I really connected with what you were saying there. Can you talk to us about your year of Yuck and
Mhm.
maybe share that with us a little bit?
Absolutely. It will make my stomach hurt a little bit, but I'll ride the ride with you to bring this message to your audience. And because I have a platform and I'm comfortable sharing stuff, this is out in the world and it's been out there for quite a while. I finally had the courage to do a video on this earlier this spring, and it was all around the experience I had of having a miscarriage now almost 9 years ago. And I I was so excited to announce the pregnancy of that baby because my oldest daughter is born 10/10/2009, and this new baby would have been born 11/11/11. And so the orderly person was like, oh, this is amazing, this will be great. And then the pregnancy ended in miscarriage, and that's devastating enough of itself. Like, that is one of the hardest things that women go through. And I'm now in a place where I'm comfortable talking about it, but most people aren't comfortable talking about it, especially when they're going through it. So to anyone listening who is going through that right now, you look me up and we can have a call. That is an open invitation. I say that to anyone who ever hears this message. But what made it really hard, Mike, was that I was not feeling it in my work at the time. I was in the middle of some reorgs. I was not quite sure who my boss was. So I didn't know who to call to tell them I wasn't going to be at work that week. I quite literally did not know who to report my absence to. And so I did what felt right, and I reached out to my previous manager because I was comfortable with her, and I said, here's what's going on. I'm not going to be at work. I trust that you'll tell who needs to be told, but I'll try to be back next week. And the next year was like a fog. It was where I was really asking myself, what is it that I want to be doing? Because that baby lived for 6 weeks. That's what we learned through the process. And I was fortunate to get pregnant very quickly after the miscarriage, which is not a lot of other people's experience, but I think I was able to move forward because of that. But I still, at the same time, professionally was wondering, where do I go next? What do I do? And now I know that everything does, to your point, it kind of happens for a reason. I was angry for a reason because it led me to the next step in my career. It led me to realizing that I need to make sure that the work I do every day matters. That is so core to my values, and it's only something I've recently discovered, that if I know that if I put a post out and it matters to one person, then it was worth me putting that post out. If I show up to work and have one conversation with one person that makes a difference, then that's what's important. And that's what that entire experience, having that miscarriage, did for me. Is it made me wake up and say, am I doing something every day that matters? And if the answer is yes, then awesome, keep moving forward. And if there are too many days in a row where that answer is no, then I know I have some tough work to do on myself to get me into a different spot.
Thanks again for sharing that, and sorry for that loss and condolences. And my brother had his wife had their first child on 09/09 of '09.
Ah, they beat me by a month. Ah.
09, 09, 09, which is interesting because if you invert the number, anyways, she's a good kid, but it was interesting as she was in labor on 09, 08, 09. He was kind of like, okay, just take a deep breath, easy, don't put. I mean, literally, Ava was born at like I think 12:34 or something like that, a.m. So like just a moment, but anyways, we appreciate you sharing that, and it's an interesting journey, to say the least. You also had what I would call, or basically you called it, an aha moment of the year. Your aha moment of the year was basically to focus on the long game. You quote Simon Sinek, on his work between the finite and infinite or infinite game. Help us to understand how you use this kind of a concept in your life and in your business.
It's a great one. I think it's a good lesson for all your listeners too, because I think so often you are ready for that next win, because that next win is going to feel so good and it's going to be what you need to, you know, do the next great thing in your life. And often in my role as a coach, I'm asked for like the coaching solve, the coaching fix. Well, coaching can fix this, coaching can fix that. And that's where I bring back the idea of the finite versus the infinite, and it's really the long game. The magic bullet does not exist. Hate to break anyone's, burst anyone's bubble, but it doesn't exist. But we have to do almost for that answer I said a long time ago in this interview of one step at a time. It's all about the long game. So if you're thinking about your goals, it's how do I work on the goal, look at the big goal, but how do I chunk that down one day at a time so I can get there and I can see the progress. And I think in the post I likened this to, I will never like doing laundry. I will never like doing the dishes. These are two things that probably are just not going to be on my list of high things to do. But guess what? I have to do them. And if I can just have a different mindset around them, that, okay, it's one time, it's one thing I have to do. And when I get done, my house is going to be beautiful, that type of thing. So we can think about it in terms of like those little tasky things, but we have to think about our annual goals, even our 5-year goals. I love, one of the exercises I love working with people on is writing down that vision for yourself in 10 years. And it's like, blow the roof off, make it as big as possible, go say all the things you want to be, do, feel in 10 years. Then you ratchet that back. What's that look like in 5 years? What does that look like in 3 years? What does that look like a year from now? And then guess what? We get to start making our monthly plans. That's how you take the concept of the long game and you break it down into that manageable, bite-sized, day-by-day piece. So that's kind of the mental exercise I work with a lot of people in coaching in, is think really long term and have a big dream, but then how do you bring that back one day at a time?
So I'm a big fan, and a lot of our listeners they do plans. They do 3-year plans, 5-year plans, 10-year plans. What is your technique to maintain momentum? Because if I put a 10-year goal out there this year, that goal might change in 12 months. How do you balance the, always looking at the long term with making sure that you're staying within your course corrections in the short term?
That's a great question. It's one I also get a lot. And here's how I overcome that. When I'm doing those plans, it's very holistic. It's not what title do I want to have. It's not what area do I want to be managing. It's not what role I want to be in. It could be that. Those could be some of the things. But it's also, what are the things I want to be doing in my life? What are some of the hobbies I want to be enjoying, the travel I want to be doing, the people I want to be spending time with? And then more often, or moreover that, what feelings do I want to be having in my life? Because if I'm thinking about how I want to feel at that point in time, I can start to have those feelings today. And that's how I manage that long 10-year plan. Because guess what? The 5-year plan that I wrote 3 years ago, we're already off course. Like, I wasn't supposed to be where I am right now. That was not a part of the plan, Mike. It was not. But I'm here, and I know it's for a reason. And it's just helping me to get to that 10-year place in a very different way. It'll show up differently. But guess what? The feelings that I'm having are the types of feelings I want to be having. It's how your heart, your mind, they're all connected.
So that's very intuitive. I actually have a little bit of, I guess, an offering for you. So I
Yes.
struggled with this, and my mentor at the time told me, he's like, "Oh, that's easy. Use your age as kind of like a benchmark. So instead of putting out there in 5 years you want to do what have you, basically look at age um, 25, 35, 40, 45, 50, etc. And as you go out further, what you really want or know, or it gets to be fewer and fewer. In the next 5 years, everything you have is there. Um, and then I took it one step further, and because I don't believe in age. I think age is actually a lie. There's no way that I'm going to age the same as somebody who doesn't take care of themselves, who smokes and drinks. And 5 years go by, well, we didn't age the same. The world might have aged, but we didn't age the same. So I often tell people that I basically say, hey, let's just say that I'm closer to 45 years old than I am 35 years old, right? Let's leave it at that. And some of you will think about that and be like, wow, for the rest of his life, he'll be closer to 45 than he is to 35. But I digress. But anyway, so I use now the years, 2020, 2025, 2030, et cetera. So That's helpful for you. Great. I do have a question though. You
Yeah.
mentioned the feelings. How do you want to feel? What do you want to feel? And I have a question for you, and you know what I'm gonna say, right?
I don't think I
Natalie,
do.
Natalie,
Let me see. I don't have ESP yet.
I have ESPN Plus too. Why are you so damn lonely?
Oh, you had to bring that one up, didn't you? Oh my goodness. Yeah. So you're referencing the finale of the 52 Weeks of Meaningful Connection series, which everyone needs to go look at today and watch the video because there's a video on that one. I'm so damn lonely, I think will be the title of my first book. And I sort of have started it, sort of have not. It's an issue. I'm working through myself on this one. At any rate, I digress. It was about a year and a half ago. I was writing the 52 Weeks of Meaningful Connection series. And so every week I'm talking about networking and connection and how you show up and be a friend and talk to strangers and, you know, bring homemade bread to your new neighbor and all this stuff. And I sat back for a minute and I just asked myself, why in the world am I doing this? Like why am I doing this? Why am I continuing to do this? And I had a really big wake up call, and it was, one of those other midnight thoughts of I'm really lonely. And not lonely from a place of I don't have people in my life, because I have amazing, terrific, wonderful people in my life. It was loneliness from a place of I wasn't showing up fully as myself. And that, I think, is the biggest loneliness that many people are in today, because they're putting on a different face, they're covering, they're not showing up as their true authentic self. And I was like, I'm done. I am done. I am done being so damn lonely. And I wrote that down. I wrote it at midnight on a Saturday. It was what I submitted for a couple TED Talks. Didn't happen on the TED stage, but I'm trying again. So you never know. Fourth time might be the charm. Um, but that message has resonated with so many people. Talk about the private messages coming in, because guess what? People aren't going to be like, I'm so lonely too, on your LinkedIn or Facebook feed, but the private messages come in and they say, wow, you just spoke to me because that's how I feel. My charge in putting that message out was to remind people that we can take this upon ourselves to show up how we want to show up. So for me, that looks like if my head is shaking yes, but inside I'm screaming no, I'm starting to say no. I might not scream it and shout it, but I will say no. If I have an opinion on something that I otherwise would have held back on because it might have been too uncomfortable to share, I'm going to share that opinion now. If there's someone I really want to meet and get to know, and before I thought, like, oh, who am I to get to know so and so, like, I'm going to reach out, and the worst that can happen is they ignore me. So I think the so damn lonely for me was a very crucial turning point in myself, to then my business, to now my family and my life. I am who I am in all places, and I have always been very opinionated in my life, but I spent probably 10 years of my career not sharing those opinions. And quite frankly, I'm done. And I'm going to be me in all places, and that has freed me, and I am not so damn lonely because I'm finally who I'm meant to be. And that's when people come into your life who are supposed to come into your life. I think there's some cosmic thing that happens that people are attracted to the right kind of energy. And when you're putting out your fake energy, people don't come to that. But when you put out your real energy and who you really are, that's when people start to come to you and seek you out and want to be your friend, and all the good magic connection happens.
So the audience is standing up right now, giving you an ovation. And with me, they are cheering you on to your next height, next success. Thank you for sharing that. Incredible, incredible content that you just gave to us. Let's talk about your future. Let's talk about where you're going. What's it look like? How far can you see?
Yeah. That's a really good question for someone who has people write 10, 5, 3-year plans. My plan looks like, how do I share more small town stories from big stages? I love speaking. I have been speaking since I was 8 years old in a barn in 4-H, and it's my jam. I love it. I still get nervous. So to all the people who are like, oh, you're one of those lucky people who doesn't get nervous, I still get nervous. Um, but I love doing that. So the more I can bring that message out into the world, the more excited I'm going to be about the growth of small town leadership. And that's huge. I did mention, I did have the little drop there that a book would be coming, and I do plan to do that. It's the matter of just getting myself to write that. That's my overarching challenge, but that will happen. And then I'm really excited about the work I do every day at Nationwide as well. I get to lead an amazing team of professional coaches who are helping our leaders become coaches. Most of our leaders already are coaches. It's the culture we have here. And I'm very fortunate to be in the part of an organization where we're now sharing those learnings. And I'm meeting with my colleagues who work at other companies and who work in other sectors and who are doing this in academia. Coaching, you know this because you are in the space, but coaching is growing. I think we're only going to see it expand even further. We've all gotten the bottom arches of the Maslow hierarchy of needs met. We're good, we're secure, we have connections, we have a good roof over our head, we generally have meaning in our work. But then it's that pinnacle of, what is my true purpose? Why am I here? And I think that's why people are going to keep seeking out coaching. And I'm excited because I get to do that every day. I get to train people how to do that every day. And it's making a huge difference one by one. Once again, coaching happens one person by one person by one person. And I am so excited when I get to have the conversation with the one person it mattered to that day.
Natalie Siston, I only have one thing to say about that, and that is you are awesome. Appreciate you very much. Let's shift gears. Let's bring this thing home. You know what I'm going to ask you next.
I think I do. I think I do now.
If you picked up the telephone, Natalie, and on the other end of the line was that cheery, bright 25-year-old Natalie Siston, you only had a couple minutes. What advice would you give to your younger self?
I have had some time to think on this one, and what I would tell 25-year-old Natalie Siston, who's sitting in Silicon Valley, who's working in Stanford in 2005, which is when, think about it, that's when Facebook's growing, Google's building their headquarters, Apple's expanding, crazy things are happening all around me. I would have went and told myself, you go get in on that. I never even contemplated doing anything other than what I did at the time in Silicon Valley. And I loved my time at Stanford. I love my colleagues. I love the work. But nothing in my body ever said, you can be something bigger. You can go be at these big companies like everybody else. And I would call her and say, you know what, why don't you go find some people who work at Apple or Google or name the tech company, because guess what? They could probably use a small town girl just as much as they could use the next software engineer. And I would tell her not to hold herself back.
Natalie, if I could give you a superpower, which one would you choose? And what would you do with it?
Oh my gosh, the superpower. This is awesome. I have a little girl, so we don't watch many superpower movies, so I'm totally making this stuff up. I would, much like Spider-Man has a little net thing that comes out of his hand, I would have an empathy net that could come out. And I would spray the spaces I go with, everyone would be kind of sprinkled down with empathy dust, and they would have to be able to step into the shoes of the person standing next to them. This goes directly to talk to more people longer. It goes to, if we can just take a minute to think about what the person across from us is experiencing, our world is going to be a much better, nicer, friendlier, collegial place where we're going to solve problems faster and get places more quickly, because we would all have a little bit more empathy in our lives.
Natalie, you're a treat to have on the show. You're a wonderful person from what I've seen, and in preparation for this show, I really became a huge fan of yours, and you continue to impress. You do not disappoint. Appreciate you for being on the show today. And I really want to thank you for all of the work that you've done. You've helped many people for many years. And I'm sure that they would join me in saying we all appreciate you and your work. We wish you much fortune and success both now and in the future. As we say on the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, Natalie, it's about the journey, and we definitely wish you well on yours. I look forward to seeing you again soon. And a huge thanks to everyone for tuning in today. And if you haven't already done so, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. And if you want, join the notification squad. Click on that little bell and make sure that you never miss another content-rich episode like today. We are on a mission to get 1,000 new subscribers this summer. So we're going to need your help making that happen. Please subscribe. And if you feel so compelled, go ahead and share the show to your colleagues and friends. Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks for supporting the show. And of course, thanks for being awesome. Good night, everybody.